introduce a charter member of our DEI committee, which is now, I believe, in its third year, serving the city of Wilsonville. And the chair of that committee is our speaker tonight. The topic, LGBTQIA+, understanding allyship. Erika Pham.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you being here tonight. I wanted to start by saying that this is a safe space, that the stuff we're talking about changes and evolves over time. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to chip in if you have a comment or a thought on something. My only ask is that you try to keep things respectful. Everybody comes from a different place and a different experience, so I just want to be mindful of that and say that there's room for everybody here. So welcome, everybody. My name is Erika Pham. My pronouns are she, her. And the other thing I want to start by saying is that I'm not an expert in LGBTQIA+. I have lived experience in it. I have done some research in it as part of that. But overall, there's just so much to know. We'll touch on a little bit of the history and a little bit of what's going on right now, particularly in the US. But my biggest thing is my experience going through it personally with loved ones of mine, friends of mine. And I'm still trying to learn about myself and become an expert in myself, to be honest. So I don't know everything that's out there, but feel free to ask questions. And if we don't know, we can figure it out together at some point. So we'll get started. This is what my family looks like. So my wife, Megan, and I met in 2014. We actually live in Villebois. We bought a house here in 2018. The year that we met, Oregon passed gay marriage that May. And then the following year, in 2015, same-sex marriage became legal in the entire US. I didn't realize when I was growing up how impactful that would be on my life at some point. And I was really happy that by the time I met my wife, things had fallen into place. So we were actually able to get married in 2017. We got married down in California, where she's from. She comes from a big family, and I tried to talk her out of every which way of having a big American wedding, but she wasn't buying it, so that's what we ended up doing. We had 3 weddings in total, so we're 3 times married over. She is Vietnamese, which is where my last name Pham comes from. So on a Friday, we did a traditional Vietnamese tea ceremony. On the Saturday, we had the full-blown American wedding, which despite the price tag, sticker shock going in, I did not regret it all coming out. And then we had a third reception about a month later for some people that we weren't able to include in those 2 events. So I feel like we are thoroughly married at this point and hope to continue staying that way. We have a daughter, Sawyer, who was born last March, so she'll be a 1 at the end of this month. It was a big journey for us as a lesbian couple to have a child together. We knew that going in. And I think we were blessed in some respects. My company actually has fertility coverage, which proved to be very beneficial for us. We tried to take the most economical route to having a child, and it didn't turn out that that was working for us. So we ended up having to go to IVF to have our daughter. So now with everything that's going on in this country, with the discussion around IVF, I think that's becoming more impactful to us as well. So I think on a personal note, as someone in a same-sex marriage, right now, it's a nervous time for me in particular, and then for us as a couple and as a family, that I don't know what things are going to look like after this election cycle. I don't know what things are going to look like with the Supreme Court that's in place right now. So we have some concerns overall about where this is going. And when we got married in 2017, I remember walking down the aisle after we had gotten married and just feeling such relief and such happiness that we were able to do it. So hopefully that continues, because as you'll kind of hear tonight, we want what every other American family wants. So we'd love to continue staying married and building our family here in Wilsonville in the US. So kind of getting into what LGBTQIA+ means, I think when a lot of people talk about it, they talk about gender, but what they really mean is sex. And that is essentially like the anatomy of a person, the biology of a person, what their genes say, are they male or female? But it's not that simple. For instance, there's actually about 1% to 2% of people born who are intersex, so they have some organs of both. They're not clearly one or the other. but it's open. So most of that, when people talk about sex, like gender reveal parties, what they're really talking about is what their child's going to have as a body when they're born. What gender really is what's in your mind. So how you think, how you feel, how you as a person, do you feel more masculine? Do you feel more feminine? Do you feel like you're somewhere in the middle? Do you feel like you're not really either one? So when people are talking about identity, gender identity, that's what's going on. It's in your mind, like how you feel in your body. Expression is then how that comes out. Do you portray like masculine tendencies? Do you portray feminine tendencies? How do you like to dress? Do you like to wear certain types of makeup, paint your nails, like things like that? And it's very tied into how we see the expression of gender as a culture. So, we'll get into this next, but the expression kind of comes out in your cultural norms, and that's how it shows up. And then attraction is who you feel romantically drawn to. So that can also run the gamut. I will say that I feel like I'm still not sure, and I don't feel like I can put myself in a category. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but I grew up very attracted to men, and now I've had a couple of female partners, but I don't really know where that stands. Like, I don't know for sure where I fit, and that's why I'm still exploring and still becoming an expert in myself. So I'm not sure about my attraction, but I know that I feel like a female, so that's why I say she, her pronouns. Are there any questions before I go on? I know this is kind of a lot to take in. I think, so one thing that I wanted to touch on here too is there's two terms that you hear a lot, transgender and cisgender. So transgender essentially means that your gender identity in your mind doesn't align with your body. Cisgender means the opposite of that. So the majority of people are cisgender. What they feel in their mind is actually matching up with their body. But for people who are transgender, they have a disconnect there where how they feel they are is not what their body shows.
So the identity can change, right, over time or not? Is it fixed?
I would say it's not fixed. From my experience, it's not. And I think it evolves as people evolve and as people grow and change. And I would say from my own experience when I was in high school, reflecting now, we didn't have these kind of words when I was in high school, so I didn't know. But I definitely identified with men too. Like, I loved Men's Health magazine and dressed like in the men's section and so forth. And I don't know for sure what that was, if that was the 90s and that's kind of how we did it, or if that's like I was really seeing that side of myself too. I wanted to go out for football and wrestling, but I ultimately feel like a woman in my body. I have a number of sibling-in-laws who are in high school and college age, and coworkers and other people that I know that are young, that are growing up. And I feel like for them, it's very fluid right now, that how they define themselves kind of changes over time as the years go on. So I would say it's open, that it's not necessarily that you feel one way your whole life.
I think I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. I will say too that there are people I think who are very like, this is how they feel and they never feel differently. So I think it could be either.
I'd agree with that too.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions on this part? All right. Okay. So kind of on that note then, the way that I see it, I see all of this stuff as a spectrum, that it's not binary, it's not one or the other. That, we talked a little bit about, like, there can actually be people who are intersex, even anatomy is not necessarily one or the other. It could be both, it could be fluid. But definitely gender identity and gender expression. You could be somewhere on either end, you can be in the middle. And then same thing for attraction. I think attraction runs the gamut. And right now, like the A in LGBTQIA+ is asexual, aromantic, which means that you don't necessarily have those feelings like everybody else has, that you don't necessarily have those attractions to people. So it could be any of this, anywhere in between, or none of it. I think, as I kind of touched on, the interesting thing about the younger generation right now is, according to the Human Rights Campaign, about 3/4 of youth who identify as trans don't even associate with a single gender. They actually call themselves non-binary, agender, bigender, genderqueer, gender non-conforming. So they really feel like they're not at one binary end of the spectrum. Does that make sense? Okay. And then what we think of as gender changes over time. I think right now, we get pushback because there's very static ways to see gender that people are trying to hold on to. But the reality is it hasn't always been like that. And it's certainly changing right now. And my hope is it continues to change and it continues to be open to just accept everybody for who they are, where they're at. But if we look at gender over time, like gender talks to things like how you present in relationships, the kind of norms around gender. You know, men take out the garbage, like women wear nail polish. So it's certain things like that, like the expectations we have, particularly in different parts of the world. You know, the US has certain expectations around gender, and even within the US in different parts of the country or different cultures in the US, you can have some nuances there. But those haven't been static. So we've got some examples of men wearing makeup over time. So the first one up here is ancient Egyptian, where men wore green eyeliner to attract the favor of the gods, or sorry, green eyeshadow to attract the favor of the gods. And they wore heavy eyeliner because they thought that indicated wealth and status. Next to that is the ancient Roman era, where men wore powder and blush and painted their nails with lovely things like pig's blood. Elizabethan England, men wore makeup as well. They would powder their powder their faces with lead. Terrible for them, but they loved the look of that white face. In the middle down there on the bottom, we have King Louis XVI in France. He and his court were really big on hair products, makeup, high heels, and they actually added beauty marks to themselves. So very much about what we would consider feminine ways of expressing themselves today. And then the bottom right is Clark Gable from the 1930s Hollywood, who people talk about as maybe being the first metrosexual man who wore makeup and looked like a beautiful man. So as you can see, like it's not necessarily a fixed thing. Our ideas of gender and how we present gender have changed a lot over time.
Hey, Erika, on that subject,
Yeah.
with Clark Gable, it made me think about just sort of celebrity, Prince, David Bowie, like there's so many non-conforming people, and that's just from my growing up. How useful is that, or was that in your personal experience, or was it to see non-conforming individuals?
I think in my personal experience, it wasn't as impactful because I feel like overall I fit like the gender, I feel pretty cisgender overall. I think when I reflect on it, when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of conversation around this, and it wasn't in the media that much. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, and we were pretty sheltered there. We didn't have these kind of conversations when I was in high school. I remember watching like The Real World San Francisco, and it kind of blew my mind apart a little bit that like this is how the rest of the world is. And that was really impactful to me. There was a person on there who was a gay man of Cuban descent living in San Francisco, and he was HIV positive. And that was stuff that we didn't talk about when I was a kid. So I think things like that were impactful to me. But I'm really excited about the generation right now because there's just so much more stuff like that out there that they can be seen. We'll kind of get into that too, but I appreciate that there are examples that people can look to and see themselves in now. All right, so kind of as we touched on, current US culture, like we have very certain expectations of girls, boys, women, and men. So I just kind of wanted to open it up and see if anybody wants to volunteer. Like, what are some things that you recognize that, we put people into certain buckets, that these are expectations based on what people's genders are?
That I'd be more handy around the house than I am.
That I play sports.
Oh, nice.
That I want to do things like laundry and dishes.
That I don't.
Nice.
Little girls play with dolls and little boys play with trucks.
Yeah.
There's an expectation that boys are more rugged.
Yes.
Little boys especially, like little boys are way more physical than girls are, which is malarkey.
Yeah.
More competitive.
Yeah. And I think like that's the thing is it's encouraged too. We talk about it a lot in my workplace. Like it shows up like throughout the ages. Like, we have a kid at home who's 11 months old and we're trying really hard to not put her in a box and say, like, these are all the things that you should be playing with. These are the things you should like to do, the things you should like to wear because you were born as a female. So we're trying that because it just continues as kids grow up, and then like getting into the workplace, I look at it and like there's certain expectations around it. I think speaking to this, I'm a strong woman at work, and that's not necessarily interpreted well. And I work in construction around a lot of men, and I've had to be tough at work. And that doesn't necessarily go over well because they're not expecting women to be loud and to say their opinion and to be forceful about things. So, yeah.
I think that even happens when you work with a lot of women as well. And you're loud and assertive.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily take that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's certainly an expectation that women and girls get along and they put others before themselves. Yeah. All right, so looking a little bit about LGBTQIA plus identification by generation, we can see over time, like this is traditionalist for the people in the back here. So people born before 1946, 0.8% identify. Baby boomers is 2.6%. Generation X is 4.2%. Up to millennials is 10.5%, and then Gen Z is coming in around 20% at this point. And I feel like from my experience, that's definitely what I'm seeing. I work with a number of different generations, and then as I said, I've got one sister-in-law who's in her early 20s, and I've got other siblings who are still in high school age. So when I look at that and the conversations they're having, it's just so much more open, and there's so much more acceptance of you may be this or that, and next year you may be this or that, and it's okay. And it's okay that people are changing over time, and it's okay who they are. So I think I would say that I don't necessarily agree that people are actually changing in the number of people who are LGBTQIA+, but that people are more comfortable, depending on their generation, being open about that. My father was baby boomer, like early generation, like that generation, it was kind of whispered around in our family that he had a cousin who's gay. So, fast forward to now, it's much more open, and the cousins that I have that are young are just out, and it's not an issue. They just speak about it. I was kind of on the cusp there, Gen X to millennial. And again, like I said, like we didn't talk about it when I was in school, and I didn't even question it through high school. Because there just weren't many examples of it, and it wasn't something that was part of the everyday vocabulary, where kids now are much more open about it and know coming into like junior high, high school age what it means, and are figuring it out and talking about it. Overall, the statistic is 7% of the US identifies as LGBTQIA+, so that is roughly the same number of people who are left-handed. So it is common, and I think that's the thing, like that you might not realize you know people who are LGBTQIA+, but you do, so. The coming out journey is a big one. These are the steps, and I'll kind of take you through my coming out journey to talk about it a little bit. I think I kind of hinted at it. I was a late bloomer, so in high school, like junior high, high school, into even early college, I was incredibly boy crazy. I loved the smell of the boys' dorm when I was in college. I loved the Backstreet Boys. Like, I had no idea that anything else was going on. I dated a guy in my 20s, and we ended up getting married. So I had a very typical kind of childhood, adolescence, and then early 20s. We had been best friends for a while, and as that kind of started coming to an end in my late 20s, that relationship, I met someone and started having a crush on her, and was very confused about it, to be honest, and started reaching out to some friends and saying, I don't understand this. Like, I've always been able to look at women that I interact with, or like in media, films and TV and so forth, and say, oh, she's beautiful. I wish I looked like her. I wish I could do this like her. I was athletic like her, whatnot. But I'd never had feelings for another woman. And I was really confused about it at first. But I think fortunately, I was also pretty self-confident and comfortable in my own skin, and I was willing to explore that and take a chance. And we started dating. So that was kind of like the self-discovery phase. And then I started telling some people, and I actually had really good reactions when I started telling my immediate friends. And actually my ex-husband had a very positive reaction to it, which I couldn't have asked for better. He's been super supportive. I told So at the point at which I found out my mom had passed away from cancer, like probably about 6 or 7 years before that, I would like to think that she's totally cool with this. She lived in San Francisco in the 60s and was burning her bra and dancing on tabletops and having herself a grand old time. So I think that she would have been open about this, and I actually feel like she knows and she's okay with it. When I told my dad, he was actually very supportive as well, which was great. So I think that part of it was easy for me, but the part that ended up being challenging was that the person that I was initially dating was not comfortable being open and had not talked to her family about it. I think there's a big sense of guilt, and there's actually, like from my experience, I've seen almost like cumulative guilt, where she had a brother who was gay, and he was already open. He'd been open like because it was really obvious that he was gay from a young age. And I wondered, your parents are clearly accepting, but I think in her mind, it's like I'm putting one more burden on my parents. And I think that's something that people go through when they're coming out, that it's not just like, what is it doing for you, but what is it doing for the people who are closest to you? And because she wasn't comfortable being out with her family and out with her friends and even out at work, that pushed me actually back into the closet. So I started being quiet about it too. And we were living on the East Coast when we met. We moved out to Oregon together. And when I first started working out here, I wasn't open at work. And it was really awkward at times. My boss at the time I knew was very Christian family. His kids had gone to Christian schools. And I was concerned about what he would think about it. And because she wasn't open and we were living together, I shut it all down. Talked about us as roommates. He never seemed to suspect. And then I told him after the fact, and he was incredibly supportive and said, I have a gay brother. So it's challenging to do that, though. It's challenging to put yourself out there, and she wasn't in that place. And that was part of the reason we broke up, because I got to the point where I felt like I was okay, this positive self-identification. I felt like I'm comfortable with who I am. I want to just be open. It's so much easier to just be open about it and take a chance. So we ended up breaking up, and I met my wife after that. So I did come to terms with it myself. And when I took the next job after that, which is actually the job that I still have, I decided from the very beginning that I was going to be open. So I think it even came up in my interview. And my prospective boss asked me something, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to have to put it out there. And if I don't get hired, that's a risk. And, there's legal ramifications around that, but that's also a risk, just to put myself out there. I don't know how he's going to feel about it, but he was great about it, and my company's been super supportive around it. But that lifelong journey is real, that it continues to be something that you think about, that you have to kind of keep coming out all the time. Like, I thought initially, like, once I'm out, everybody knows. But I think especially because I'm someone that can be straight passing, and when I meet other people, they don't necessarily assume. I've had a number of people assume that my partner is a man, assume that I'm straight and so forth. And it's still a risk. Like, I still think about it a lot. I would say especially if I'm coming out to someone that I know has religious background, I don't know how they're going to feel about it, and just struggle with what that's going to be when I come out to them. And I would say that I've been very fortunate because I've had very positive reactions when I have. I don't think I've actually ever had a negative reaction, which is incredibly fortunate, because I don't think that that's most people's experience. And I also feel privileged because outside of the fact that I'm LGBTQIA+, I am a woman, so there's that dynamic, but I'm white, I am straight passing, and it's a lot more challenging if you're not those things. It's a lot more challenging if you're a BIPOC person to also be LGBTQ+. That intersectionality adds other dimensions to that. Any questions on this?
I have a little question.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched on, you were talking about statistics, and then during this little section of your conversation, you mentioned that within one family, there were two children that were gay. Is that very common? Like,
from what I've seen, yeah, like that it. when I started looking at my family and my partner's families and things like that, it pops up, you know, and yeah, I've known several. I don't want to be too obvious about who it is, but I've known several families that they have a number of children who are, so yeah. Like, I don't know, I mean, it's speculation again, like I'm not an expert, but also like, again, there's just so much more comfort around it now too, that when I look at the people who are open, you know, I think that might be part of it, is that they're more willing to be open now. So you see it more than I would see it when I reflect on people in my parents' generation and like that, cousins and stuff like that, in that level, just not as open. Mm-hmm.
Is Vietnamese culture more open and understanding, or?
It's hard, like, I hate to like just kind of lump everybody into a certain thing. I would say, like, I've been to Vietnam twice, and the second time I went was after we had gotten married, so I had the Pham surname on my passport, and I was nervous about that because I thought we would get questions coming in, because they're kind of known for asking questions as you're coming through at the airport. I'm forgetting, customs and so forth. They're known for asking questions, and I was with my wife at that point, coming through together, and they didn't say anything. I think overall, the Vietnamese culture, like in Vietnam, is not as open about it. But I think in the US, it's hard to say because it's just so different here, and it's the US culture. And, you know, there's nuances of Vietnam in there, but it's not necessarily the same as Vietnam as a country. But it's, I don't know, again, I hate to just kind of lump everybody together.
Yeah. I'm just curious how you decided to take your wife's name.
The very honest answer about that, it was an easy one because I had taken my ex-husband's name, and when we got divorced, it was a very amicable divorce. It seemed just more hassle than it was worth to change my last name back to my maiden name, and then it didn't make any sense at that point to try to hang on to it and fight to keep that name, so it was a very easy one, is the honest answer there. I don't think I mind though, like, so I personally, like, we knew coming into our relationship and getting married that we wanted to have children, so I think for me, knowing that we don't look alike and our kids might not look like us, and, you know, we're already going to have questions about our family structure, I wanted us all to have the same last name. So, all right, so now we're going to do a little history lesson, and this is the part where I have learned some stuff about this, but I haven't lived through it personally, so we'll talk about it a little bit, and let me know if you have any comments or questions. So we're going to take the history back to around World War II and start there in the US. So in World War II, LGBTQIA+ people were not allowed to serve in the military. They did have loopholes, and they allowed those loopholes to happen during World War II because they needed the soldiers. But once the war ended, that really got shut down fast. And a couple of things were going on as we were coming out of the late 40s into the 50s in the US. The first thing is, obviously, like all of the concern around communism in this country and the Red Scare in this country. And they had what they called the Lavender Scare, where politicians and people started associating LGBTQIA+ people with communism and saying that LGBTQIA+ are morally weak, therefore they must be willing to sell the country's secrets to the communists. So they started to really set that connection up and say that you couldn't trust these people. The second thing is that it was seen, LGBTQIA+ people were seen as psychologically disturbed. So the second thing in there is that it was listed as a mental disorder in the American Psychiatric Diagnostic and Statistical Model, which is like kind of sets all the diseases like psychiatrically. And because of those two things, that it was associated with communism, it was associated with mental illness, it was really looked down on. It was illegal at the time in most of the US to be openly LGBTQIA+. And then in 1953, President Eisenhower signed an executive order saying that you could not work for the federal government if you were LGBTQIA+, which meant that about 5,000 people were immediately fired. About 20% of the people had to take an oath that they were loyal to the government. They were not LGBTQIA+. And then that started to trickle down to state and local governments. So they did the same. So you essentially could not work for government in the 50s if you were LGBTQIA+.
On what grounds, Erika, do you know what the reasoning was?
It was tied in mostly to the communist idea that having access to government secrets and so forth, and you were willing to sell them to the communists. So that was how they set it up. But I feel like there's things that are used as ways to justify, what people want and don't want to do. So that seemed to be what was happening in the 50s. So not a great time in this country to be LGBTQIA+. I think hence why we see people who are like of the traditionalists and baby boomers generation afraid to be open, because this is what they were living through. All right, and then fast forward to the Stonewall riots. So now you're in the late 60s. We're in the middle of the civil rights movement. We are like in the thick of the Vietnam War. MLK Jr. had been assassinated. So people were at the point where they were not willing to take it anymore. And the Stonewall Inn was a bar nightclub in New York City. It was known to be frequented by LGBTQIA+ people. But at the time in New York, it was illegal to actually solicit a relationship with someone of the same sex. So it was known, it was quiet, they were there, but they would randomly get police raids. And in late June 1969, the police raided it, and people had had enough, and they actually started to fight back. So the patrons fought back. They barricaded themselves in the bar. They protested outside. They ended up protesting for 5 days afterward. And that really started the LGBTQIA+ civil rights movement in this country. The following year, in June, they set up a parade to commemorate that event in New York City, and that was what started the Pride Parades. So that's why they're in June, is a reference to Stonewall. They started having them in other cities in the US, and now they're in a lot of major cities in the US and the world. And then President Obama actually designated that site of the Stonewall Inn as a National Historic Register place to recognize the gay rights movement in the US. So kind of following here, like we're gonna kind of go down and around like in a big U here. So this is kind of looking at some of the stuff that has changed since then. Big picture, high level, as we were talking about kind of the mental disorder take on it and like marriage take on it. So in 1973, the APA had declassified homosexuality as a mental disorder. So that was a good thing, step in the right direction. 20 years later, they decided that wasn't right. But at the same time, Maryland became the first state to actually single it out and say same-sex marriage is illegal. So ups and downs there. A note that in 1978, Gilbert Baker designed the original rainbow pride flag, which is the one that has just the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet stripes on it. That has evolved over time. So there's a number of pride-related flags now. In 1979, there was the first national march on Washington for lesbian and gay rights. So starting really to lean into that civil rights movement around LGBTQIA+. But in 1993, President Clinton had the don't ask, don't tell military policy. So at this point, you could be in the military if you were LGBTQIA+. Don't talk about it, though. Don't ask anybody. Don't talk about it. In 1993, also, Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, which banned federal recognition of same-sex marriage. In 1996, the Supreme Court case actually said that equal protection did apply to sexual orientation. So that was starting to, again, turn the needle in the right direction. And then in 2004, Massachusetts became the first state to legalize same-sex marriage. And then by 2015, so 11 years later, we had gotten to the point that there was a tipping point in the US. So many states had passed it, and they ended up saying, the Supreme Court, that same-sex marriage was legal in all states in the US. As of 2018, openly transgender people are now allowed to join the US military. And then finally, in 2020, the Supreme Court prohibited LGBTQIA+ discrimination. So we had been, I think, through the early 2000s and 2010s, moving in the right direction. What we'll get to now is it's starting to swing the other direction. So these bar charts at the top, I know it's hard to read, but this is 2018 here at the bottom and 2023 at the top. And this is the number of bills that have been introduced nationally that are anti-LGBTQIA+. So 2018, the year after my wife and I got married, we moved into Villebois. There were only 42 bills nationally. Last year, there were over 500. So it is really a challenging time in this country, again, to be LGBTQIA+. And I would say particularly if you're transgender, if you've been following the news, there's a lot of stuff around that right now. Bathroom access, gender affirming care. some of the other stuff going on, sports, not being able to play sports if you're transgender. And then overall, there's a lot right now around education and information about LGBTQIA+, what can be taught in schools, what can be discussed in schools, and so forth. So overall in this country, there's a lot to be concerned about. And I think, as we'll see next, Oregon is a great state to live in for this. But my fear is that as the stuff is trickling up nationally at the state level, if it trickles up to the Supreme Court level, if it trickles up through Congress, depending on who we've got in leadership, this could turn like everywhere in the country right now. So it's concerning to see, but I feel for people who live in these states who are stuck, who don't have the means to leave the state or don't have the opportunity to leave the state, and this is what they're up against. I've heard a number of stories like this. At Next Benedict, who was a young student in Oklahoma who died a day after they were beaten in their school. Their representative in the state of Oklahoma came out and said, "We're so sorry that happened, but we want this filth out of our state." And that's not the way I feel like we should be looking at people. They're all people. And it's concerning to me the number of things that are taking those human rights away from people who are LGBTQIA+. And then kind of a final note here on the bottom, I think the really scary thing is that there are 65 countries in the world where it's illegal to engage in LGBTQIA+, and of those, 12 have the death penalty for that. So I will say that that's something that my wife and I look at. We love to travel, but we're very mindful of where we're going and what the kind of feel for that is and whether or not we would be unsafe. So there's certainly countries that we wouldn't travel to that we would feel unsafe in. So as I said, the good news for people living in Oregon is overall, we score really high on LGBTQ+ policy here in the state of Oregon. As I was looking at this, the biggest thing that I saw is there's not a specific state law that bans discrimination based on lending and credit for LGBTQIA+ people, but that was one of the major things that stood out as something that the state could do better. But this doesn't mean it can't happen here. In 2021, we had a school board in Newburgh, right over the hill, who said it was not okay for employees to put up any sort of pride-related stuff or Black Lives Matter or get in political stuff in the schools, which we'll talk about a little bit. I think it's hard for me because that's how people feel safe, is to see signs like that in their schools, that they're accepted and they're okay. They since changed that, so in 2023 it's okay again, but it's really concerning that it could bubble up anywhere. And kind of as I noted, the transgender violence is, I think, the worst thing right now. As you can see, a couple bullet points on here. Transgender people are 4 times more likely to be the victims of violent crime and 2 times as likely to be the victims of property crime. But there's a number of other things too. Transgender people, the only protection that they have is for employment discrimination, but they have no other protection in this country. So they're up against family, they're up against workplaces, they're up against politicians. People who are transgender, a quarter of them don't have health insurance, and a little more than a quarter of them have actually been denied health services because they're transgender. A third of them are living in poverty. Overall, it's a third, but if you're Latinx or Black, it's higher. I think Latinx is almost close to 50% poverty rate if you're transgender. And then half of people who are transgender have experienced some type of sexual assault. So it's really risky to be a transgender person and be open, even in the US right now. So I find that really concerning, that we need to do more to protect people and make people feel safe. And the way that these laws have been going lately is certainly not helping that. Any other questions before we kind of move on from this history section? Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to say another important statistic to add that hasn't changed in the past 6 years is that 40% of gender diverse youth experience suicide ideation, and that statistic is not decreasing, it is staying the same. So that's very concerning.
It is. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I just think this is a little emotional for me, sorry.
Sure.
So our oldest child came out as transgender in college, and we're supportive, love her, but the world isn't so supportive, and luckily family has been. But I gotta say, we're seeing all of this all the things, and as a mom, I'm just scared. And to your point about the suicide rates, we know friends of hers who aren't able to share with their family what's going on. And one thing we learned as we were learning how to be supportive and not like put all our questions on her shoulders, we joined PFLAG, and they were very helpful to help us learn about stuff. But one of the things was that when someone who is transgender has the support and love of their family and their friends around them, their suicide rates go down dramatically compared to when they don't. And it's just such a, it's such an important point. And then the other thing I want to say is there were a few people who had made comments to me about our daughter that she must have been influenced by this or that. And we lived in the Middle East a lot of her life growing up, and I don't think that, that was not a society that was open to this. And so I just always, sorry, I'm finding my words here, but it's not about outside influences,
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that. I know that that's hard to share. And I would say, first of all, I'm super happy to hear that you're so supportive of your child, because I've seen both sides, and it is just such a better experience when the parents are supportive and open to it. I share the same thing. Like, there's family that are not open to it. Sorry, what was the last thing you said? I've lost this thread.
It was about the suicide rates go down dramatically when families are supportive.
Oh, and the outside influence. So we've been up against that too, the outside influence. I would say super honest, that our families are concerned that by us being so open around the family, that's encouraging other people. And I would just say there's just so much media out there that's about straight cisgender, that if that were truly real, you'd have a lot more people being funneled into that. And it's just really a matter of people being more open and willing to talk about it, and to be able to accept themselves as who they are, and like really recognizing that that's their authentic self versus people being persuaded. We've had some of those same conversations that it's like, I can't convince you to be straight or this or that. Like, so it is what it is. So yeah. Thank you for sharing. So kind of on that note, representation is really important. The first thing is names and pronouns, which is a pretty basic thing, but it's something that is a struggle sometimes for people to get that respect. But it just helps them feel like that's who they are, and they're recognized for who they are, and they're accepted for who they are if people use their correct names and pronouns. The second big thing is visual cues. So I kind of touched on that with a conversation about Newburgh and the pride flags, and it is really important. That helps people feel understanding and acceptance and empathy if they see that out there. I noted that I work in the construction industry, and it's, a very macho culture, masochistic, or, male-dominated culture, and I don't always know how that's going to go over. And my company has been giving out Pride hard hat stickers for several years now. And what's really cool for me is seeing people wear them, and the coolest part is seeing people wear them that I'm not expecting to be wearing them. That it helps me feel like, they're on my side, or maybe they do have somebody in their lives who is as well, and they're more open about it, and I'm more safe here because there's people even that I'm not expecting to be okay with it that seem to be okay with it. The other thing is just in the neighborhoods. So here in Wilsonville, seeing that stuff around, I know the city's putting a lot of effort and resources into making sure that that's obvious, like overall, but certainly in Pride Month. And my wife and I have counted, as we walk in Villebois, we can do the mental kind of map in our heads of where we see pride flags or other sort of pride symbols around. And that helps us feel more safe and secure there too, that, there's other people who would be willing to step up for us and help keep us safe in our own neighborhood. And then books like TV, film, gaming, like media, also really helps because, people who aren't LGBTQIA+ or don't necessarily have people like that in their immediate circle, it gives them the opportunity to learn more about it. And the cool thing about media is that it's an opportunity not just to reflect the reality of what it is for LGBTQIA+ people, but to shape how they're seen in a positive way. so that we can break down some of those stereotypes and misconceptions. The picture reference there, I'll call out as Heartstopper, and I think it's pretty popular with young kids these days. And I just love it. It's just a great, teenage romantic, but it happens to be a couple of guys who fall for each other. So it's really important for people to be able to see themselves in media. And this doesn't just apply to LGBTQIA plus people. This is for everybody, that representation is so important. That if you see somebody out there who's being portrayed in a good light, it makes you feel like you're comfortable here too, you have a safe space here too, and you can exist in the world as you are. So very important. And then some simple ways to be an ally. So we'll kind of walk through these. The first is understanding the history of Pride. So we've done a little bit of that tonight, so we know a little bit more tonight. Same thing with educating yourself on LGBTQIA plus language. We've done a little of that tonight. And I think on that note, I forgot to bring this up before, but does everybody know what the LGBTQIA plus stands for? And would anybody like to volunteer to offer that up?
Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, queer, intersex, asexual.
Yes. Well done. Thank you. Don't say that's gay. So I think this is kind of like a broader thing now, but don't put it in a derogatory term. Like that used to be something, even when I was growing up, we said a lot, but it's just not okay to call that out and say it like that. Yeah.
That's gay is, I used to coach high school soccer.
Yeah.
And I wore the short socks, instead of crew socks.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my players said, "Your socks are really gay."
Yeah.
And I went, "I didn't know socks had a sexuality."
Yeah. That is a great response.
I said, "Really?" So he never said anything after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think fortunately it seems like we're kind of past this point with like that's gay is like, but there's still certainly a lot of other stuff out there that's said that is not okay. Did you have something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around a lot of my, me and my queer Gen Z friends, we actually say that's so gay as like a compliment. Like if they're wearing like a cool outfit.
Yeah.
Like, that's so gay.
I like it that that's changed. The fourth thing is remembering that people have a right to privacy. So I think where this comes in is you might have questions, but think about how that person on the receiving end would feel if you asked them that question. If it's something you could probably Google, then maybe do that first instead of asking them, or make sure that they're comfortable, that you've had conversations with them before you go there. I would say that I feel that I'm very open with questions. So if you do have any questions, I don't mind answering them, but not everybody feels like that. And it can get awkward. I've been asked some weird questions now, I think, as we've been married and started having a kid, how that worked. But again, I don't mind answering those questions, but not everybody feels that way. Taking a stand with LGBTQIA plus people. So it is like if you see something, say something, stick up for people that you see. Your vote matters, and what you vote helps influence these bills that are happening in the course of our country. Check out, go ahead.
One other thing that just floors me is that the use of the word faggot.
Yeah.
It's actually a bundle of sticks.
I never knew that.
Yeah, if you look it up, it's because it started with the burning of witches and those sorts of things, and they had bundles of sticks. So somehow the word continued on. So people say something, it's I'm not a bundle of sticks.
You've got some great comebacks. Thank you for sharing. Check out LGBTQIA plus media. There is a lot of it out there right now, and I think the thing that I find so encouraging is it's just normalizing. It helps show that we are just like everybody else and we want the same things as everybody else. But it also helps people understand what the experience is like, because there are elements of the lived experience that are very different when you're not part of like the cultural norm. Buying from LGBTQIA plus businesses. This is one of the things that we did tonight. The baked goods tonight are from Hungry Hero over in Sherwood that is LGBTQIA plus owned. So I encourage you, if you like them, check them out. They're a very cute little shop in downtown Sherwood. And acknowledge that you'll make mistakes. It changes so fast. Like I didn't know that that's so gay is like a positive thing now for the younger generation. So it's hard to keep up with it. It's hard to keep up as people are learning and things are changing and vernacular is changing. But just be graceful with yourself and be open to it. If someone corrects you, it's not a personal thing. It's just them trying to teach you that this is the right way to say it now. Did you have your hand up way in the back there? No? Okay, sorry. All right. Any questions on this or thoughts on this? Yeah.
I just have a question about community.
Yeah.
So, like, I know in Portland, there's pretty like close communities for queer people, and how is it here in the suburbs? I know you can't speak for like every.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it? How does that feel? Or that was. Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Because I feel like in Portland, like there's a big like lesbian community and like a huge lesbian community up there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's like.
After living there for 10 or 12 years and moving here, I feel comfortable saying that it doesn't exist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was one
I
of my
concur.
questions coming in tonight.
Yeah.
Like about.
I mean, PFLAG, we had to go to the Portland chapter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
not even
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I'm optimistic that will change over time. Like, we're one of our only friend group who've like moved this far out into the suburbs, and I think we get questions sometimes about it. But it's like my response to that is, we do live in a neighborhood where I see pride flags around a lot. The city has a DEI committee. They're very open and very inclusive here at the city level. So I hope that will change over time, because like, we want affordability too. Like, we're trying to raise kids here, and it's not cheap for us to make kids. So we need some place that's affordable and a good community to live in. We like the schools here. So there's a lot of advantages of living in the suburbs. So hopefully that changes over time. Yeah.
If I may, it just kind of worries me though, because, and I know it can happen in a lot of places, but we know of incidents in our own neighborhood here where, and I guess they're older teenagers, I don't know, but they'll go and kind of harass people that have a pride flag, knocking on their door and running and that sort of thing. We, saw a video of somebody at a local business a year or two ago at nights, making a big show of destroying a pride flag, and it's just it's the opposite of welcoming. It's a little threatening.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually thought about that, because we put one out like every year around Pride time, and I've worried about the negative attention that might have to us in our house, and even more so now, like for our child's safety. But I try to go back to, like, we need to do it, because if not us, then who, and to try to keep putting myself out there. And that's part of the reason I'm doing this tonight, that I think by being open and just talking about it, I'm trying to help normalize it, that this is okay for everybody, and to make it a safe space for everybody. Because if we don't talk about it and we don't have those things out, then it really doesn't feel safe. So I'm trying to take a chance on it, and we get some of the knocks and stuff too, but if that's what it is, I'm willing to do it. Because again, like, I've had a pretty positive experience, so like, I definitely want to put myself out there, because I know that there's other people who haven't had such a positive experience, so I'm trying to help persuade people to go in that direction positively.
So if you didn't put the stuff out in front, in a sense you're going back in the closet.
No, yeah, I agree. I'm not, but I'm also, I'm not.
Seems like it from.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
My husband and I have been together since '87, so I mean, we've been through a lot of all of it, We don't put a pride flag out. I've honestly always believed the best way to live in Polly, even moving here to Wilsonville, is just by example. We mow our lawn, we walk our dog, we buy Girl Scout cookies, we're attending the Tempest at the high school. We're doing all the things that hopefully anybody should do in a community. And we feel like that's how we find that concentric circle with people.
Yeah.
We're different maybe in the bedroom, our family may look different, but we have those overlapping circles that we both love dogs, or we both love hikes, or we both, whatever those are.
Yeah.
And we use those as sort of our pride flag to say, hey, okay, that's how we are after them,
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think, kind of to your point, that it's one thing to hide it and to like not want to admit it, but I don't know, like it's a weird thing too, because you wouldn't go around and just tell everybody, oh, I'm straight, I have a wife, like you know what I mean? So I don't go around like just openly saying like, oh, hey, by the way, like, so it's not so much that you're in the closet if you don't talk about it or you don't display that, but it's just how much you're willing to, and like how you show up. Like to your point, like I try really hard too to just show up by setting a good example of like, I'm a good human, like, you know, being respectful when we go out and like cleaning up after our child in restaurants and things like that. So just trying to like show people that it's normalizing and this is just another family and we do look a little bit different, but every family looks a little different. So this is just how ours looks. Yeah. So there are some things that are in it for you for being an ally. And by the way, like any of that stuff that we just talked about could be done for any different type of person who is a minority group. There's so many ways to be an ally to people to help them feel welcome and a sense of belonging. So being an ally helps open yourself up to new relationships that you wouldn't have had if you're willing to meet new people and talk about new things. It helps you challenge your own assumptions. I would say that my wife and I have a lot more conversations around things like such as like household chores and stuff like that, because we're both female. So, you know, how do we want to split it up? And we both, you know, identify as female. So I'm the garbage person every week, you know, so it just makes it a little different. And I actually love that about it. It's something I wasn't expecting for my life, but it's a fun benefit that I really think a lot more about that. And now as we're raising our child, I'm really thinking about it even more to try to not put those assumptions on our kid. It helps you continue learning and growing in your DEI journey by getting to know people from different backgrounds and experiences and being willing to put yourself out there and stick up for them, which helps you make a positive difference in someone's life and who doesn't feel good when you do that. And overall, the big thing for me is I want to make sure that we're creating safety and a sense of belonging. So by being an ally, that helps you do that for other people. So everybody feels like they can show up as their authentic self and be okay and be safe here. So in closing, we've talked about this a lot. We just talked about it, but you know, LGBTQIA plus people want the same things as everybody else. Like I say it a lot. I have this little thing in my family where I say happy, healthy, safe, and loved. You know, we want to feel safe in our home. We want to feel safe in our community, psychologically safe, financially safe and secure, healthy, that we have good health, that we have access to health care, that we have people who are going to treat us as any other person when we show up for health care. That was one of our concerns when we had our daughter, candidly, was like, what is that experience going to be like for us as a lesbian couple, and what kind of questions might we be asked? Like, you know, would they look at my wife and say, well, where's the dad or where's the father, and like not, you know, look right past me. So health, happiness, that we want to pursue happiness and whatever that means, like, and find our life's purpose. And loved, that we want to feel safe and belonging. And it makes me so happy that I was able to meet my wife and marry my wife. Like, that's a big deal, because I think when I was a kid, I never assumed that my soulmate would be my same gender. So it's awesome that I met her. I knew right away that she was the right person for me. And I'm so happy that I get to be married with her and build a life with her and have a family with her. And kind of on that note, like, what I want for our community is to have that sense of belonging. I want to feel safe here, and I want everyone else to feel safe here too. I feel like they have a place here in Wilsonville and the greater community. And then on a global scale, I would love to see less violence, really no violence against people, because they're different. There's so many different ways that people commit violence against others who are not like them, whether it's over sexual orientation or gender identity or religion or race. So I'd love to see no violence, equality for all, equity for all, and my vice is cupcakes. So the other thing that I'm hoping for is one of the cupcakes at the end of the night. So, so there we have it. Do you have any other questions or thoughts or things that you wanted to share? Yeah.
When you were talking about being LGBTQIA and traveling, I was curious if what's your experience been in like certain places where you've had to adjust the way that you act?
I think fortunately, I don't recall ever feeling unsafe in the travel, but I think that there have been a lot of misunderstood expectations. For instance, I was actually moving to the West Coast with my last partner, and we stopped in Iowa where I grew up, and we went to get a hotel room one night, and the woman at the counter kind of leaned across the counter and said, well, there's only one queen bed. And we said, that's okay, that's fine. And no, there's only one bed. And it's like, no, it's fine, it's fine. So I think that there's like assumptions that happen, but that could happen anywhere. But again, we are mindful of where we travel. We've traveled overseas quite a bit. We historically have traveled in countries that it's at least as open and accepting as you would find generally in the US. I was a little concerned about Vietnam, and we went to go visit my in-laws' relatives over there, and I personally felt like it was really big of them that they were older generations of people who didn't necessarily understand all of this. I can speak a little Vietnamese, but they couldn't necessarily speak any English, and they're towing me around, this one white woman with the family, and having to explain to the family like who this person is and that she's married to this other woman in the family. So I thought it was really great that they were willing to do that, and I actually didn't have any negative things come out of that. Like, everybody seemed open and welcoming, so that was a good experience. Yeah, others? Yeah. The woman in the back, way back.
Hi.
Hi.
When do you see, for a while I've been thinking, since like the percentages that you're showing, that we are moving in a direction that, quite frankly, when the younger people are doing more voting and that sort of thing, that it'll change things because so many are identifying. I see that as an educator, but at the same time, I guess my question is, how do we move towards this umbrella of what constitutes normal, right? And that and so there's not that concerns of safety and being on the outside sort of and that sort of thing. When at the same time, and recent studies are starting to show that in the the traditional ideas of boys and girls, that some of the Gen Zers, the boys are tending to be more conservative, and they're seeing a gender divide where girls are being much more progressive, and that there's something going on with boys. And so what are your thoughts around, because I was hoping that we were moving in a direction of something else.
I was hoping so too. I've had a lot of different thoughts about it too, and I obviously don't know the answers. From what I understand, most generations start out much more liberal as they're young and then get more conservative as they're older. I'd like to think that this generation coming up is going to stay that way, more so than past generations have, so that they are going to start to change things as they're getting able to vote and able to have more of a voice in their communities and their governments. I hadn't heard that about the boys being more conservative, but I think that there are certainly pockets of the country too where none of this is okay, that could be an influence as well. So it worries me that what's happening is kind of pulling us in the wrong direction again. And it worries me that, like, based on how parents are responding to their kids, that affects like what's going to keep happening. And if there's such big pushback on this generation, then they might kind of carry the line, and it might not change as much as we would like to see it change. But I try to tell myself, like, we talk about it quite a bit at work, because I've actually been on the women's network at my company for a long time, and kind of thinking of it as, you've got a group of people who are like diehard supporters, and they're in it and they get it and they're going to be right there with you. And you've got some people on the other side who are totally against it, and you're never going to convince them, but you've got a lot of people in the middle who could be swayed or are at least open to coming along, and trying to capture those people and get them to come along on the journey. And how do we do that to change the tide, to convince people that this is okay, it's not going to be a detriment to you, it's making the world a better place, like, just come along with us and change things in the right direction. So sorry that that's not a definitive answer, but that's my thoughts on it.
No, it's a complicated thing.
It is.
And I'm seeing some changes. Like, I've been teaching for a while, and the past 2 years are the first time that I haven't seen any of the, we'll just say boys in terms of, a category wearing nail polish. Like, it stopped, and the students who want to be called a different name, are all biologically female, and so not the other way anymore. And so I'm seeing something going on where there's some fear happening of being themselves. And so, yeah.
I don't know, because our situation is that our daughter came out of college, but we also have a high school son. And since his sister has come out, I don't know if it's related or not, but now he's wrestling team and Sea Cadets and, you know, and all these.
Stereotypical things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe it's related, maybe it's not. I have my suspicions, but I don't know if that's also related to what you're talking about too. I honestly don't know.
I'm curious too, like my wife and I have talked about it sometimes that like so, you know, our experiences as women, but I think especially coming from the industry that I come from, I don't think it's as accepted for men to be gay and to be open about it as it is for women. And I think, you know, women are seen as a certain way, and like, you know, we're already like the more emotional gender and like more physically like emotional and so forth, like that. I think it's accepted for different reasons, and I have questions sometimes if it's harder to be an open male than it is to be an open female.
In your industry?
Well, I would say specifically in my industry, but I don't know, like you know, you've got a very different experience than I have, and I feel like I've been fortunate. I've had a couple things happen, but overall I feel like when I tell people, they're pretty accepting and they don't really give me a hard time about it. So did you have something else?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking, I was really grateful for your slides about how to be an ally and the benefits of being an ally. And I just noticed that they all sort of spoke to us as individuals. And you mentioned a couple of things throughout the night about how as a business you can be an ally and policies and stuff, or as a consumer where you shop. Do you have any thoughts on how a local government can be an ally? A city, a school board, a county, or does anybody in the room have any thoughts?
I would say, honestly, I feel like the city's doing a great job with that right now. I have loved working with Bill and Liana and Zoe Mombert, who's not here this week. And overall, the city, I feel like, has such strong support for it that one of the things, like, first of all, we have a DEI committee, and this is one of our focuses. Like, this is the speaker series that we're doing. But we have a cultural calendar that's online. And then one of the things we're trying to do is pair up ways to recognize the different types of people and different backgrounds and experiences and, like, you know, religions and things like that as a city. And the city was actually the one that I feel like has really been driving some of the stuff about Pride this year. So I think, like, I might be a little out of turn if, like, one of you guys wants to jump in, but there's plans for a mural, there's plans for a pin, like, so the city's doing stuff to support it.
So a little more detail on that. Is it June 1st, I believe, is the day that there's a call for artists out now at the Parks and Recs facility in Town Center Park. They're going to have a Pride mural up all month, and Liana has designed Pride pins that we're having fabricated and to be given away at that event. So that's just a nice little piece of inclusion. If you read Boone's Ferry Messenger, that's come the last 2 years with the rainbow masthead in June, and that's we've heard good feedback from folks to whom that really mattered, just as a gesture of inclusivity. We're always, I think, open to suggestions, but I think the people that are in place are empathetic and really it means a lot to us that everybody in Wilsonville feels like they have a sense of belonging. And so it's not an agenda, it just comes from a genuine place of wanting people to feel like they belong.
I would say I feel like I definitely feel that from the city, that I don't feel like they're doing it because it's their job. I feel like they're doing it because they genuinely care. Yeah.
I would add too that, I think Wilsonville, you know, having just been here moved here a couple of years ago, the month I moved here was May. I think it was May or June. And not only the Pride flag, because it's kind of easy to gay wash stuff, but there was a really well-written message from the mayor.
One from Erika too, she had the column in there.
Okay, this was a couple of years ago, so I don't know. But anyway, and her message was clearly written from the heart, and not written just to tick a box. And now, having gone through like Civics Academy here, and now I'm on the Parks Board, you can see throughout all of this that there's a common thread in the city that is very welcoming and looks out for, and I'm not talking about just LGBT, but I mean kids with disabilities on the parks now. Like, oh, is this park going to be good for kids that are in a wheelchair or kids that are disabled or blind. So you see that lens used everywhere, I think, for the betterment of the city. So, I think Wilsonville's, if you're gonna live in the burbs, no, we could do something about the food, I don't know.
The new Mexican restaurant's really good. I went there, yeah. I'm Megan Vidal, I'm on the school board, Westland Wilsonville School Board. I can't speak for all the school board, I just want to say that for the, I can say that at the high schools and middle school levels, like we have affinity groups for kiddos that identify as LGBTQIA, and there are large symbols. You can see last year, I think with the book banning, I'll call it an incident, maybe, saga, that we did, keep books that tell those important stories in the library. But I just want to tell a personal story. I live in Villebois as well. I was on the PTA for 3 years before I joined the school board, and professionally I work at Randall Children's Hospital, and I support our gender care clinic, and we have 500 patients in that clinic. And so it's part of my work to work with our doctors on clinical medical education. So I thought, talk to the counselor, I talked to the principal, and I thought, well, what if we had a pride night at the grade school? And we did, and I was shocked. Like I was born in 1978. I don't know, I felt like the whole night I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. Like, this is happening. Like, that was going through my head like the whole time. And I brought the counselor in from the gender care clinic, and she gave a presentation, and I was like, couldn't believe it. And I bought tons of rainbow swag, and I have it everywhere. So, I guess what I want to say is, like, a straight person and as like an ally, I just want to do the most I can, like, to help. And it's really exciting to live in a community that at least some of us do support each other, and that's so nice, to say the least. So
I think as parents who have come into this just a few years ago, we've always been supportive of the LGBTQIA community, but to have the reality of your child coming out as transgender, we're seeing things that maybe we didn't notice before, like someone driving in their pickup with a Confederate sign and something, a bumper sticker against our child, or in our local community, or the incidents he spoke of, or just trying to find our daughter medical care. So we have insurance in Oregon, and she goes to school in California. And let me tell you, that's a nightmare. That's just a nightmare to make that work. So just, we're seeing sides we didn't see before, and I think maybe we're kind of looking at that right now. So.
Thank you.
Any thoughts on Clackamas County eliminating their diversity equity?
It makes me very sad to see that. I feel like it's concerning because it's hitting closer and closer to home, that you hear about this stuff happening in other states because of some of the Supreme Court cases, rulings that have happened in the last year. We actually, like at my work, again with the Women's Network, we had to have like a big meeting with our legal about, what we could do as the Women's Network and what we could say and couldn't say. And it was just to go from being so supported and feel like we could do, whatever we needed to do to take care of our employees, to coming back to like, what can we legally do or what can we not do and what's going to get the company in trouble and so forth. Like, it's hard to get pulled back into that. And that's kind of what I see there too, that it's like, we've had talks as the DEI committee here in Wilsonville that when we started, I feel like we felt like the world was our oyster. Like, it's gangbusters. Like, the city supports us. We've got community support. Like, let's go do this. And in the time that I've been on the committee in the last 3 years, we went from that to having to have conversations about how do we better protect the DEI committee here in Wilsonville and codify it so that it's harder to get rid of, so that the same thing doesn't happen here in town. So it's been a pretty significant political shift, and I find it concerning. Yeah.
I would also just add, and this is my personal soapbox, and I won't name any companies because keep this even keeled, but you said supporting LGBTI businesses, which is great. I will eat all of dessert. We'll do my part. But the flip side is, please don't go to these companies that are purely anti-LGBT. And I will not name them.
Yes.
But there are chicken places, there are sporting goods places, there are
Hobby places.
home improvement places,
Yes.
there are coffee places. And you just have to Google, anti-LGBTQ policies and company, and you'll find your list. Don't give them your money. It drives me crazy when I see people in my own community, subset, having lunch at some place that,
Yeah.
is clearly against me.
Yeah, it's a great point. I didn't mention
Flipping
it.
around in that sense, so use your dollars wisely.
Yeah, and vote.
And vote, yeah, I mean, to that point, I've seen people who say that they're allies and that they are supportive, and yet when they go and vote for someone who would, it just goes wrong.
Oh.
I don't even know
Oh, that's
how.
a whole other meeting.
I don't know how much of this have you observed, but one thing, I have 2 school-age kids at home, and what gives me sort of hope is, like, it's just not an issue. Like, my 8-year-old has no problem, like, even understanding and saying, oh, okay. Their mastery of pronouns, because they've grown up when in a time when the language is spoken universally in schools. So, that in contrast to like watching my mom struggle with pronouns, for example, even though she's a loving and supportive and would call herself an ally, she just can't conceptualize it in her motor brain. But my 8-year-old can.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's perfectly okay that your mom cannot conceptualize it. This is where I always I get a little upset with our community and that they're become so rigid and so it's like people want to get to the right side of history.
Yeah.
We sometimes have to help them. We have to welcome them. We have to hold their hand. We have to acknowledge. And you said as much, to acknowledge you'll make mistakes, but be welcoming, and it's perfectly fine that your mom. I struggle with it.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with it.
Yeah.
So.
I was an English major. I had a real hard time with they for a while because it just grinds my English ear. But yeah.
And just on that, I'll say it's a gray area and it takes some people skills, but you can kind of recognize when somebody is failing but trying.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when somebody is trying very hard to do the opposite.
Yeah.
They're trying hard to do the wrong thing.
Yeah. People who get there, we just have to help them get there.
Yeah, I would say even his mom in southern Idaho is using the right pronouns and the right name that our daughters so trying. We were really happily surprised.
Yeah. I like to see the best of people and give people the benefit of the doubt and believe that, like you said, that people want to do the right thing and they want to be on the right side of history. So, yeah.
We need to get you there.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting how ingrained those like we're talking about the assumptions and that are in our society.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, like David and I, we're divorced. We're both divorced, right? And we choose to spend time together. But when, that people will automatically assume that he's my husband, I'm his wife.
Yeah.
It just, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it's, sometimes I ignore it. Sometimes I'll just say, well, we're not married, or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just that's how our society thinks.
Well, and that's how brains work too. Yeah, exactly. So it's just being open.
My name, it's spelled in a way that people somehow put an H in it. It's Alisa, it's not Alicia. It's just A-L-I-S-A, and yet I always get called Alicia for some reason. I mean, it's just because your brain sees a certain thing and,
Yeah, I think the most important part is to just be open, that if somebody says something, to correct it, that maybe that'll help you think next time too. Like you remember at that time, but then it's like next time, maybe you don't make that assumption again, so.
Right. We, last October, we went to India. Cindy's last name was Luxoy. We look at the documentation. I was Mr. Luxoy. She did all the work. Very nice.
Nice.
That's actually happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
Okay. But it is an interesting case because I know we noticed that you go to a restaurant and they always defer to me, give me the menu. She was never given the menu. So what I'd have to do is, here's your menu, can I have another menu?
Whereas we always get asked if we want separate checks.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
He's paying for it.
Depends on the night.
Yeah. Always separate checks. But I think it is interesting. The moving here to Wilsonville was not something I necessarily wanted to do, but after 12 years in downtown Portland, I was sort of like ready for a change. And, our next door neighbor turns out to be like 75-year-old retired veteran and parole officer and just every American flag every day of the week. And I was like, oh Lord. And he met me and it was great, very nice man, actually very, very nice man. Met my husband and was like, oh, so you live here, where do you live? And you saw him and he's like, right there, right next to you. And you could see him do the math in his head. And in his defense, he oh my God, he just turned it around and was like, oh, okay, and changed the subject. Again, I believe that most people want to, it's not in their norm, but they want to get there, and he's turned out to be a lovely neighbor, and, a lovely person, so. I think I was judging him as much as he may have been judging me, or may not have been. So we all have prejudices to work through.
I actually assumed my wife was straight when I met her for an embarrassing amount of time through a dinner conversation. So we still joke about that today, that was just my bad assumption coming in, and she kept trying to correct me and I just kept missing it, so but she kept me, so I think one other thing of note, so the city is donating money to New Avenues for Youth in Portland, which is a nonprofit that helps LGBTQIA plus youth. Particularly important to me is housing and houselessness for LGBTQIA plus youth, because a lot of them are unfortunately kicked out once their parents find out. So happy about that.
Great. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the great conversation tonight. Have some snacks.
So quiz time. We did this before. When is the next DEI speaker series event?
The 4th of April.
Who said that?
Me.
Okay. Last time, you get a pair of suits.
No,
Last month,
I will wear them.
Last month I threw the prize and I hit the mayor in the face. I just sound like a carrot.
Oh my gosh, so cute.
And in a month or so, where can you find this and our other speaker series events?
YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for indulging my desire to be quiz show host.
She just wanted the sauce. She was waiting to jump on the
And I also, as I have an opportunity to do each time, I like to acknowledge what members of the City Council are here. We have Council President Chris Ackerwall here. We have Councilor Carolyn Berry here. And I say that because without the support of City Council, there would be no DEI committee. Without a DEI committee, there would be no DEI speaker series. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.